Did you know that Matt Walsh, the theocratic fascist and best-selling children's author, as his Twitter bio will tell you, of the Daily Wire, went on Dr. Phil to debate gender identity and gender pronouns?
I had no idea.
Literally on Dr. Phil's show. It was amazing because the whole thing was couched in a very pro-leftist narrative. And they put a 15-minute clip up on their YouTube channel. So I haven't managed to watch the whole thing. I've only watched the clips that I can find of it around. But they put a 15-minute clip up, and it's only about 3 minutes of the actual clip, which is Matt debating the activists. And the rest of it is front-loading it with the activists' concerns. So let's begin by meeting the people he was debating. And play the first clip.
I'm Addison.
And I'm Ethan.
We've been together for about
5 years.
And married
for 3 years.
I use they, them pronouns. Being non-binary just means that I just don't identify with the gender I was assigned at birth, and I don't identify exclusively with being a man or a woman. I'm something in between, outside of that binary.
My pronouns are he or they. I also identify as a non-binary. To me, being a non-binary means having the sense of freedom to explore my gender in whichever way I want. I don't have to perform or pretend to be someone I'm not. I can be my authentic self.
It's two female-bodied people who are transitioning, it looks like, to like male.
Right.
The top scars on one of them. The other one hasn't undergone that surgery yet, it appears.
Okie doke.
It's just my guess. But anyway, they're obviously sane people, and they have views on gender pronouns. Let's have a listen to those.
And Addison, many people think gender pronouns are exclusive to the LGBTQ plus community, but that's a misconception, true?
Yeah. Well, everybody has pronouns. Like, you may use he and him as your pronouns, right? I use they and them as my pronouns. We all may have a certain gender pronoun too, but I think it's important for people to understand that for trans and non-binary people, we often change our pronouns to reflect who we are when we come out and be who we are.
Who actually has pronouns? Like,
Are they mistaking pronouns for names or nicknames here?
I think so. I mean, whoever uses like he to refer to themselves.
Only someone who's literally called he, and there's like no one unless they're Chinese or something.
Or someone who's literally talking about themselves in the third person.
Yes.
He has entered the room and demands dinner. That would be very weird. You say, I, like I do with my wife. I have entered the room and demand dinner. Or me, or my, or something like that. You have a possessive pronoun. You don't have this sort of like third person pronoun. So no one actually has their own pronouns. Your pronouns are assigned to you by other people around you. You know, you're a he. So I'd say he's gone to the bathroom or whatever. You know, I wouldn't expect you to use them yourself. It would be very, very strange.
Yeah. They're indexical. Well, their use is entirely indexical, so it therefore changes in the situation that you're in. It's not something you can lay claim to as a person.
No, exactly. And that's, I think, one of the fundamental linguistic contentions I have with all of this. But they also have lots of thoughts on gender. So let's have a listen to this.
Gender is something somebody can't know just by looking at somebody.
Nope, yeah. Because everyone is going to present and express themselves in a different way. I know, it's very confusing, right? Everyone's like, what is going on? But it's really, about us breaking that assumption that we can tell someone's identity, someone's story, their pronouns, even their name, just based on how they look, right?
What the hell is it then?
Who thinks you can tell someone's name by just how they look?
Well, you can see what they're doing here, can't you?
Yeah.
But they're basically saying, you can't assume my gender, so I have to give it to you. You have to refer to me in that way in perpetuity. It's a political power game.
It is a power game. It makes you dependent on something from me before we can interact. So it's essentially a kind of formality that an aristocrat would approach a peasant with. You need to know my rank before you can address me properly, or there's a social penalty.
Yes, you must only speak when spoken to.
Precisely. But I love that, you can't tell someone's name in advance. Well, no, obviously not. Why would I think so? But then that's what the social construct of gender presentation is. I'm not wearing a dress because I'm a man, and you know that because you just have to look at me. So what she's saying though is that this is some sort of secret about a person. It could be anything. Right. Could be absolutely anything. It's like, yeah, but it can't be. That's the problem. But anyway, let's. You can see how this is all very front loaded. This is the first 5 minutes of this 15-minute clip where it's him like trying to establish the lunacy that's about to come out of their mouths. And so you get all this nonsense. And he's just like, right, okay. And you can see him looking increasingly tired throughout this segment. And then they've got this whole thing where they're literally, it's Dr. Phil or educating Dr. Phil and the audience on this, on the shibboleths of this whole philosophy. Let's play the next clip.
Adjective that describes a person whose gender identity matches or aligns with the gender he or she was assigned at birth. Now, this would be what has been traditional for centuries, right? Why does it need a term?
You know, if we don't use that term, then we end up saying maybe real men or normal men or regular men, right? Or we just say men, and then we say maybe transgender men, right? And the thing is that we need to realize that trans women are women, trans men are men too. And so we just want to have a term for that privilege, that assumption that your gender identity is going to match the one that you were assigned at birth.
What's wrong with saying normal men?
Oh yeah, well, my first contention is always, of course, going to be that your gender is not something that is assigned to you. Like, it's not just an arbitrary stamp that you are given. A doctor simply looks at you and then decides what anatomy you have, and then next. They're not assigning a set of characteristics to you. These are things that you
intrinsic to you.
Yes.
Yeah.
Precisely.
Assigned to you by nature, perhaps, making progressivism a revolt against the natural world, which it is. But yeah, notice the language games. If we allow you to say you're not a real man or a normal man, then we lose. We lose this conflict. You know, we can't get you to accept our framing if you're allowed to create your own framing. And so here you have to use cisgender, because that implies that cisgender and transgender are just two equal categories. There's nothing different about them. These are just exactly the same, just referring to, you know, in quality. And that's not true, because normal has a sort of judgmental aspect to it, as in it's unusual or it's normal. Normal being the norm, the overwhelming majority. And so if you use cisgender and transgender, it erases the sort of quantification of each category. Cisgender being 99.9% of all humans who have ever lived, transgender being a total irrelevance in the grand scheme of everyone else's lives. But if we present it this way, you can't just say normal and then ignore me and marginalize me. But anyway, so you notice that throughout the whole of that, Matt wasn't on the stage. He wasn't there to talk about any of that, right? He didn't get that, as far as I can tell, he didn't get his own little bit where he lays out his thing unchallenged either. But then he apparently is brought out to the stage and he comes out and he gets to lay out his basic positions. So let's listen to his view.
I could sit here and say that I feel like a tomato plant, but that doesn't mean that I'm actually in those things. So your self-perception, you can have whatever self-perception you want, but you can't expect me to take part in that self-perception or to take part in this kind of charade, this theatrical production. You don't get your own pronouns, just like you don't get your own prepositions or your own adjectives. You know, it's like if I were to tell you, my adjectives are handsome and brilliant, and no matter whatever you're talking about me, you have to describe me as handsome and brilliant because that's how I identify. It makes no sense. You don't get your own pronouns. That's grammar. That's language.
Because, I mean, he's not wrong, because a pronoun is essentially someone else's opinion about you. I think you look like a man, therefore I'm going to call you he.
Yeah.
And an adjective is very much the same. You know, the handsome and brilliant Matt Walsh, if I thought he was handsome and brilliant. Or I could say, you know, he's ugly and stupid if I thought he was ugly and stupid.
Yeah.
But again, like, it's a power game. It's demanding that they say about you the thing you once said.
Yeah. Because pronouns, of course, involve some sort of judgment. You look at somebody, you judge, you judge based on how they're presenting themselves, how maybe they wish to be called. By undermining the very fact that has anything to do with judgment, you're then opening up an endless, it could literally be anything from that point. This is the attack helicopter argument, isn't it? It's that the pronoun ceases to be from the way they want to use the language.
And also you're depriving that person of their agency of judgment. You're saying, I make the judgment for you about me, and you're morally obligated to follow it.
Yeah, and you're violating me and everything about me if you do not abide by that.
Exactly. And I simply do not consent to that kind of social interaction.
No.
So
neither should anyone.
That makes them a little bit, if you're violating people's consent with your pronouns. But anyway, so Matt Walsh then goes on to explain that just because a boy has played with the doll's house, that doesn't make him a girl. Let's play the next clip.
So you think it's a delusion? Someone is self-delusional.
Yeah, I think it's delusion. It could be mental illness. It could be it's a lot of different things. With children, there's also just a basic confusion that all kids have. Like that's why when you hear a parent say, "Oh, my 4-year-old son came to me and said that I'm a girl now, and so that's what I'm gonna raise him as a girl." No, you're a 4-year-old. I have 4 kids. When a 4-year-old boy comes to you and says, "Oh, I'm a girl," here's a good follow-up question: what is a girl? Ask him what he means by that. What do you mean by girl? And when you ask him that, here's what he'll tell you. He will tell you what he really means is that he wants to do some of the things that girls do, like play with the dollhouse, or he likes the color pink. That's fine. Play with the dollhouse, but you're still a boy.
Bit disappointed with that response.
Hmm.
Do you think I'll let my 4-year-old son play with Doll's House? Hell no.
Hell no.
Got to be on patrol here, Matt. He can't play with Doll's House unless it's Action Man storming it to save a hostage or something. No, I'm joking.
But
his point's correct.
His point is that that there is, of course, they're actually appealing to something that the LGBT community 40 years ago would actually regard as reactionary, which is there is a set of characteristics that comes with being a man and a woman, and that they're somehow encroaching on those things by not obeying it.
Yeah.
And that's ultimately what he's pointing out. I think.
Exactly. It's falling back on the traditional view of what gender is. As in, if you're playing with the Doll's House, then you must be a girl. And if you think you're a girl, then you are a girl. And it's like, but that's exactly you say. That's a very reactionary view of what gender is.
These are precisely the arguments that the likes of Holly Rigby are making to try to claim that actually, if you're young boys playing with girls, you're a trans woman.
Yeah, which assumes that girls play with dolls. Which is the opposite of what they were saying about gender and social constructs. Yeah. But anyway, so this gets us to the important question of what is a woman? And I love it when gender activists are presented with this question because it's one they're very, very reticent to answer for exactly the reasons we've just covered. Let's watch.
This is one of the problems with this left-wing gender ideology is that no one who espouses it can even tell you what these words mean. Like, what is a woman? Well, can you tell me what a woman is?
No, I can't. Because it's not for me to say. Womanhood looks different for everybody.
What?
I love the no, I can't. It's like, you can't even define what a woman is. Like, womanhood, I don't identify as a woman, so I can't tell you what being a woman is. I don't identify as a house, but I still live in one. Like, I can still identify it, Like, if I did that means the only things I could ever possibly define by that standard are the things I consider myself to be. Like, I can't define what a giraffe is because I don't identify as a giraffe.
No.
I'm wandering through the Serengeti and I get attacked by something, but I can't identify what it is, even though it's got a mane and claws and teeth and it's biting me. But I don't know what it was because I didn't identify as the same thing as it. It could have been anything. Could have been a sheep for all I know. It's ridiculous. What a ridiculous standard. And look how they've disarmed themselves from even making judgments about reality now. Because as I said, like, the whole philosophy is about taking away your power of judgment. Now they're like, I can't define a woman. I'm not equipped to be able to look or set out a set of definitions as to what a thing is. And so they're like, well, okay, after we've absconded our ability to define a woman, how does Matt define a woman?
What do you define a woman as?
An adult human female.
And what does a female mean?
Well,
how
that's
do you define a female?
someone with female reproductive organs.
Okay.
Someone who's, here's the thing, when you're female, it goes right down to your bones, your DNA. So that's why if someone dies, we could dig up their bones 100 years from now. We have no idea what they believed in their head, but we can tell what sex they were because it's ingrained in every fiber of their being.
Because it's a concept that corresponds to the objective world, and
Yes.
therefore there is a paradigm with which to define womanhood there immediately, even if one disagrees with it.
Yes. It's innately intrinsic to every cell in that person's body. It affects the development of everything about them. As he said, archaeologists can dig them up like 1,000 years later and see, oh, I'm dealing with a woman. These things are demonstrable. And so I find it fascinating that she's like, well, what's a female? Well, really? Are we playing this game now, are we? Oh, we just don't know what females are now. I mean, this is fairly easy. I mean, Merriam-Webster would define it as of relating to or being the sex that typically has the capacity to bear young. Is that good enough? And the thing is, as well, we know that this person is being disingenuous and that this is a cheap debate tactic because in the front loading interview that they did with Dr. Phil, she gave her definition of this.
Got to hear this.
How do you explain the difference between sex and gender?
I consider sex to be our biological makeup. Our chromosomes or hormones, our genitals is a biological makeup.
Oh, it's our
but our
genitals.
gender is more of an internal sense. So think of it like this. Sex is what's between the legs and gender is what's between the ears.
This is in the
Right.
same 10-minute clip.
Right, so don't suck the dick bigot is the point?
Yeah, but the point is she's obviously lying,
Yes.
Or what's a female? Because that's how you define it. You know that it's about your biological sex. You're dishonest. And we've already got, literally like a minute in, Matt Walsh like define female and they're being dishonest about their answers. That's how weak their position is. But anyway, they say, well, what if they can't reproduce? Let's watch.
So I'm trying to understand. Your definition is that a woman is someone who is female, you said, right?
Correct.
Gotcha.
Is a biological female.
So what happens if we have maybe someone who is female, identifies as a woman, right? Cisgender woman, right? As you just explained, maybe doesn't have the ability to reproduce.
That doesn't stop them being female.
No, it does not.
Inevitably, every female loses the ability to reproduce.
Yes, it's called a menopause.
Yes. And so even if they can't reproduce, that doesn't make them not female.
Yes.
In the same way that if I lose my legs, that doesn't stop me from being a human.
And even if they're completely infertile, will never have the ability to reproduce, they still have bodies that are formulated on the possibility that they could.
Mm-hmm.
And
what we're talking about is some sort of anomaly, some sort of mistake, some sort of inability, because it's an imperfect biological process, not because they just don't exist. And there's no such category as female anymore. But yeah, so ridiculous. But the great thing about this is Matt's response. He totally ignores this and just goes straight on the attack. That's what
I have answered the question. You stood up here and said trans women are women.
Yes.
Tell me what you mean. What is a woman?
Womanhood is something that, just as Ethan explained, I cannot define because I am not
But
myself.
you used the word. So what did you mean when you said trans women are women if you don't know what it means?
Right. So here's the thing. So I do not define what a woman is because I do not identify as a woman. Womanhood is something that is an umbrella term. It includes people
That describes what?
entirely nominal.
people who identify as a woman.
Identify as what?
As a woman.
What is that?
Was to each their own. Each woman, each man, each person is going to have a different relation with their own gender identity and define it differently.
That doesn't-
And so
I'm not
trans
asking for
women are women too.
Yes, there's no interplay between meaning and reference, according to her.
Yep.
Yes. Very good.
I mean, I'm not a cup of tea, so I can't define what I have as a cup of tea. And if someone brought me a cup of coffee, I would just have to drink it because I couldn't define it as not a cup of
Yes,
tea.
we can't speak or make judgments about literally anything because of the things that we're not.
No. And I wrote an article about this in 2020, actually. So it's nice that I quite presaged this. Just an article against the case against the intersection definition. And if you can scroll down a bit, John, you can see that this is not a new idea. If you go down to the UN Women part, where you can see what they had defined a woman as limitless and formless.
But utterly indeterminate.
Yes, utterly
So
indeterminate.
nothing then.
Yeah, exactly. So nothing. And so not only, the fact that they're like, oh, a woman is anyone who identifies as a woman. So that's obviously a logically and semantically incoherent sentence. It's self-referential. It never ends. So that empties the term woman of any meaning at all, right? So why would anyone identify as a woman?
If they had bad intentions, maybe.
That's true, but let's assume they don't have bad intentions. Just what's the appeal of using that word to describe yourself? If I made up a word, called blurg, and there's no content to this word, this doesn't mean anything. It doesn't denote anything. There's no attraction to being called that thing. Why would I call myself a blurg?
You've got no reason to.
Exactly.
Because the word means nothing.
Exactly. And so they've effectively abolished the term woman by emptying it completely of content. And the worst part about it, though, is another point that I'm making there. What is there that prevents a child from identifying as a woman?
The legal protections surrounding the idea that they're not rational agents who can speak for themselves in the way that adults can.
From our perspective, but from their perspective, would they be able to say that?
Well, yes, I suppose they could make that claim through their own epistemology.
And so
If belief is sufficient to qualify as a gender, then yes.
Exactly. There's absolutely nothing to stop a child from entering into that scheme, even though by their own standards it's a worthless scheme. What's the point of it? But anyway, going back to Matt, and like you can see the absolute paucity of their ideology on display here. They've got nothing. There are no foundations to this. It's not persuasive, and Matt is totally demolishing them. If I was a gender activist, I'd be so annoyed. And in fact, lots of them actually really were so annoyed by the fact that Matt Walsh is allowed on Dr. Phil on TV to talk to people about and challenge them on their points, because it's completely annihilating their perspective. But he's got this absolutely devastating point that we end on here.
Listen,
won't even tell me what the word means, though. So that's the problem.
You want to reduce women, you want to reduce men down to maybe just their genetics, our genitals, our chromosomes, right? That's what you're saying.
You want to do is
that's what
you want to do is appropriate women. You want to appropriate womanhood, and turn it into basically a costume that could be worn.
Yes.
Oof. Devastating.
Yeah.
Just demolishing. You want to wear the word woman as a skin suit.
Yes, or for anyone who wants to wear the skin suit, irrespective of why they would want to wear it.
Exactly. With absolutely no reason or rhyme to how we can delineate someone being honest about this, being truthful about this, or preventing them from claiming it when it's obviously not true, because it's never not true. And you can see by her face where she leans back and she is furious. This was the killing blow that has absolutely destroyed her. But right, so there are a few other clips that I'm not going to play more for time, but they had Matt Walsh put this up on his own channel about the trans bathrooms aren't a safety issue. And of course, all of the pro-trans activists were like, there's no evidence that there's any risk of letting a male-bodied person who's dressed or identifies as a woman into women's bathrooms. This is easily rebutted by Matt, because if you can get to the next one, he talks about the Loudoun County trans bathroom rapist that we had to cover in a premium podcast because we're a bit nervous about putting this up on YouTube, because it's something that happened where a boy, a male-bodied person dressed as a girl and went into 2 bathrooms and raped 2 women, 2 girls. And it was covered up by the school because
they'd be seen to look bad?
Apparently.
I feel ridiculous saying that, but...
Well, it makes transgender people look like they might not be the innocent lambs that we're being told they are.
And that would look worse than covering up a rapist's crime?
A rapist of a teenage girl's crime, yes. But remember, the argument that they make in the Matt Walsh clip is, but how will the trans people feel about this? Like, well, how do the rape victims feel about it? I mean, which one is more important?
Well, the value judgment's clear to be seen. Their feelings are more important than the victims who get raped.
Yes.
And what does that tell you about their moral character? That they're probably not very nice.
Exactly.
And don't deserve to have society based around what they think is correct.
Exactly. And not more so. So we've got people who wish to take away your moral and judgmental agency. They don't have any sort of sensible, truthful foundations upon which their ideologies lie. They essentially want to liquidate all categories and make categorization something that's beyond your capability. And they literally don't care about the victims of rape. So finally, the final strategy that is presented to us is by a pro-trans professor who wants to know, why does Matt even care about this? Why do you even care about this? Why do you care about the total intellectual liquidation of the world around you, Matt? Let's watch.
Because on one hand, they say, well, you got your biological sex, but then your gender is whatever social construct. But then they turn around and say that trans women are women. So a man who identifies with the gender, the social construct of womanhood, actually is a woman. So if you can laugh all you want, but this is a logical problem. You are conflating sex and gender just by saying that. So that's the problem.
There's biological sex, and then there is gender identity. Part of me wants to ask why you care so much, because it's really not that big of a deal.
Oh, yeah. Can I answer that?
Yes, because he's a father.
Yes.
And also because, as he says, he wants to live in a world that's grounded in truth and reality. He wants to have a predictable world that we can actually center ourselves in. And I love the childless academic and the 2 female-bodied people next to her are all living in this world of feelings and fantasies. And the man on the other side is like, well, I want categories and objective truth that relates to reality as we can all perceive it. It's very, very interesting how the distinction there is. And the man with the family, the childless activists on the other side, and they're like, why do you care about what we inflict in children? It's not a big deal. It is a big deal. It's a huge deal.
And everyone should care about it.
Yes. And this is why Matt Walsh, honestly, bravo to Matt. He did an amazing job, absolutely demolishing them. And I really enjoyed those clips. And apparently, as he posted on his Twitter feed, this was very traumatizing. We just scroll down on this. The other guests on the panel are complaining. Since the taping, Ethan and I have been experiencing a heightened level of anxiety to the point where we've had numerous nightmares and depression spirals over the past month. This week has been worse. How could that be if what you were saying is true? I mean, there is just not anything you could come up to me and say that would cause this to happen to me. Come up and say, I don't really think you're a man. Okay, well, I don't care about your opinion. I don't really think this, that, or the other. Okay, that's fine. You don't have to. It's not going to give me nightmares and depression spirals.
If it's doing that, it probably suggests that deep down that your view is not that well grounded.
You're lying.
Yes.
That's the point. I mean, to have nightmares and depression spirals, I'd have to be set upon by a gang of men in the middle of the night or something. Some real physical harm would have to come to me. Maybe I'd have to lose one of my children or something. It would have to be really bad. Not just telling me that there's an objective definition of woman. If that's the case, and if you can go down to the next one, I think they've got another one just underneath it, John. Cheers. Yeah, I attacked. What ended up happening was much different than what they discussed with us, and we left feeling attacked by another guest and played by the producers. My goodness.
And that's the fault of Matt, is it?
Yep, that's the fault of Matt
because he uttered the unutterable.
Yep, because he has an opinion on what a woman is that they don't share. Absolutely ridiculous. Well done, Matt.
The climb of the heretic.
If you enjoyed that segment from the podcast, The Lotus Eaters, you can go to lotuseaters.com to subscribe to get access to all the premium content we have on the site, such as this interview that Carl did a while back, but I felt like featuring again just because it was so good, which was the interview with Posey Parker, the adult human female, as is defined as woman in the dictionary, but not for much longer. If you'd like to follow Posey, you can also follow her at Getter, that is at Posey Parker on getter.com. Thank you and goodbye.